What's up, guys? Today I am very excited to be bringing you guys a live Q&A with a developer for Marvel Strike Force. I believe you are a senior game designer.
That's correct.
And this is Zach Reynolds, I believe.
Yep, that's my name.
So before we even get started, just kind of want to say, like, I get a good amount of feedback, from people who are fans of the game, and we see a lot of posts on Reddit, and I think I don't think I'm wrong in saying that you kind of have everyone's dream job.
I mean, that's probably true. I think, a decent amount of the feedback, relates to people enjoying like developing and creating characters. So yeah, that's
absolutely,
that's primarily what I do. Yeah, so
right,
it's a good job.
It is. I know I'd be having a blast doing your job. I don't know. One of the things I'm looking forward to in this Q&A is figuring out if there's parts of it that aren't as glamorous as they appear, perhaps. But yeah, a lot of people I came up with this really cool kit for this character if they ever get added to the game, and it's just fun. And the most exciting thing when a new character comes, everyone's just like, let's see the kit. They're just so excited. So
I'm always there. Like every time we release a new build, and you guys are mining and stuff, I'm always there watching social to see what people are talking about. So it's exciting for me too.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It's I imagine it's like little art projects that you get to let loose and be like, I hope they're happy with my latest single.
Always nervous, but yes, definitely a lot of fun.
Well, you also have the benefit of, and again, I don't think there's been more than like a couple characters that the general response was like, eh. But even when that happens, then you get an exciting like, oh, there's going to be a rework, and then everyone's excited all over again.
Yeah, that's the glory of a live game is we get do-overs, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, again, I think people even appreciate those, but I don't want to. Well, I do want to keep you here all day, but I'm not going to. So I will get into some of the questions here. So to start off, what prior experience does someone typically need to end up in your position as a senior game designer?
Yeah, so first thing is like years of experience in game design, right? So I've been in the games industry for over a decade now. I got out like right out of college. I got into the games industry. So that's probably the most important thing. Game design as a whole, there's like lots of different stuff you can go read up on. There's more and more schools doing like interactive, what do they call it now? They didn't have it around when I was in school. Interactive and entertainment training is what they call it. So that stuff's a huge boon. But primarily it's experience in the industry. So whether that be, you come in as like a associate game designer or work your way up through QA or something like that. Those are all, valid ways to kind of get to my position. I think another important thing is having a bit, especially in the senior role, I should say, having a bit better knowledge of the production of a game, right? So understanding like all the components of what makes a game, all the way from concept to production, having a better idea of if you're like riffing a feature with someone, having a pretty good idea of like how long it would take to do something like that. And then like all the various components that are going to be needed to make that thing. So, I'd say like the big thing that like separates a senior from a standard game designer is that knowledge, the extra knowledge of understanding, components and how a game is made.
I to make sure I get what you're saying, basically like you don't want to end up in the position where you're like, I have a great idea for this new feature, and you are like completely oblivious to the fact that it would require like total redesigns of like several existing systems. Where it's like, that's not as simple as you think it is.
Or at least coming out of the gate with that, right? Like, right. Like if you have a really good feature and you think it's gonna make the game, 8 times better, maybe it's worth spending 6 months on that thing, but you should be able to at least upfront tell people that it's going to take that long.
Right on. And also it's interesting. So it sounds like there's like several paths to get to your position.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a little bit more of a merit-based promotion of like, look, this person's demonstrated that they should make these calls.
I think so. I think also like, if you're like, say if we're hiring a senior game designer, trying to get someone onto our team, one of the things that we look for is there something that this person is bringing to our team that we don't already have? I think that's another good way to look at it, because that's really, really important with senior game designers, is making sure that you have enough diversity of ideas and culture that you can, kind of shave off the bad ideas and get to the best one.
Nice. Prioritizing the innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely.
And by the way, for people watching at home, going to be starting off with a bunch of questions about Zach's job and aspects of his job, and then obviously we're going to get into some more Marvel Strike Force specific stuff. But I just want to open up with some questions about what he does. Yep. Not to say that your job is not interesting, but I think there's at least with my audience a slight majority of people who are more into Marvel Strike Force than game development.
Probably, if I had to guess.
That said, though, what would you say is your favorite part of your job?
I mean, I think it's the idea of, I've been a Marvel fan my whole life. I grew up reading a bit of comics, but I was a huge Sunday morning cartoon kid.
That's why the X-Men are so good.
Exactly, right. And hey, it's why they're so popular.
It's true.
Yeah. Being a lifelong fan of Marvel, and then obviously I'm a huge fan of what they did in the MCU. Getting to concept, implement, create characters is just incredible. I certainly saw a far path to getting here, but after decades gone by, and here I am. So I think that's probably the thing I like the most, is just the idea that we get to take these characters that have these years and years, decades of lore, and figuring out because in our game you have all these animations and stuff, but you only have 3 abilities, right? So it's figuring out how we can extract the soul of what makes a character that character, and turn them into a representation of them, in this strategy game. The mechanics of it all, I guess.
Translating the character. Yeah, and I think you do a great job with it, and I think it's important that you're as big of a Marvel fan as you are, because it shines through in the kits. I think I speak for the player base on behalf of saying, I don't think there's any character whose kit doesn't thematically line up with who they are, and that's something you can only accomplish by knowing and being a fan of the Marvel characters. So.
Yeah, and it's not just me. I mean, we've got a lot of guys on the team, guys who have been avid comic book fans for their entire lives, and that's really, really helpful too, because there is a lot of Marvel lore. There's a lot.
Yeah. Oh, that I've learned. Yeah. Sometimes you guys will introduce a character, and I first have to Google them to see who they are, and then anytime I Google a character, it's they've been on these 12 teams over these 40-year runs, and it gets real in depth.
Yeah. There's a lot of lore.
But I also think you guys do a great job of keying in on what is the most well-known version of this character. So with the classic Cyclops, there are all Cyclops has taken many different shapes and forms, but I think you guys nailed what pretty much everyone goes to when they think Cyclops. So.
Yep. We do our best. Luckily, the game's conceit lets us pull from different, because obviously in Marvel we got the multiverse. There's a bunch of iterations of every character. So luckily, our game's conceit lets us kind of mix and match and get the best combination.
Absolutely. So on that note, somewhat switching gears, what would you say is the least favorite part of your job?
I thought about this one. Traffic. Definitely traffic. Yeah. I don't think, I'll be honest. I mean, aside from the standard, grumbling, I had a bad day or whatever stuff at work. I mean, I can't really think of an individual thing that drags my day down consistently. It's primarily getting here. Living in Los Angeles is definitely the worst part.
So would you say if you could work remotely, dream job instantly?
Actually, no. I mean, even though I don't like traffic, there's a good amount of our job that I think is collaborative. That the idea of having a group of combat employees being able to kind of bounce ideas off of each other really quickly. I do think that's pretty important for what we do. So Yeah, no, I think it's important for us to be close.
So we just got to get you like your own private suite on top of the office building.
There we go. Helicopter.
Oh, not a bad idea.
That's the way to do it.
So having said that, then what would you say is like the full scope of your responsibilities beyond making a character kit?
I mean, that's primarily it. I mean, it's a long list, right? So we go all the way from like planning, right? So we try to plan out characters as best as we can for like we actually have like the next 2 years of characters planned roughly, you know, not like every character, but at least like themes and stuff like that. So we go from like planning them to and then like brainstorming them. So we get a bunch of designers together and myself and artists, kind of figure out what that looks like, what the character is going to look like, what's important about a character. We then take the character into what we call like a mechanics meeting. So we start kind of figuring out baseline for what their kit might be. And then we take that all the way to start actually implementing and play testing the character in the game. And then, you know, like my job is kind of overseeing this, giving instructions. Sometimes I'll take a character here and there. And then, you know, doing kind of like the final reviews on the characters, I guess, before they go live.
Awesome. And then just for my own curiosity, would you say it's like more common that someone has an idea for like, it would look really cool if the character does this, let's make it make sense to like put an ability description to it? Or is it more common of like, this is what we want the kit to do, what's a good animation to fit it? Or is it could go either way?
I think it's probably close to 50-50, you know, like sometimes, so we'll take Cyclops for an example, right? Like it would be weird if Cyclops didn't have an ability where he just kind of beamed everyone, right? Because that's a really iconic thing that Cyclops does is he like takes the goggles off and just, you know, lets it go. And so like there, you know, we're like, okay, we probably need to make an ability that does this. Like if a character has a really iconic thing they do, we need to make a mechanic around it. But then on the flip side, you know, sometimes we can easily say, you know, we need this character to do A and B. Oh, that means this attack probably needs to be unblockable because the visuals for it don't make sense. You know, so I'd say it's about 50-50.
Cool. So in your long march to end up in this position, what would you say, like what other games primarily have impacted your design philosophy, I guess?
I play way too many games. So I'm a huge RPG fan. That's probably my favorite genre. So like, I even here I wrote down a bunch of them. So I'll just read off the list. So like RPG wise, I'm a huge fan of the Final Fantasy series. Elder Scrolls Morrowind specifically, best one. The Witcher series, Dragon Age, Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights. You know, kind of D&D CRPG games. I played a lot of MMOs, so I've played a lot of World of Warcraft. Star Wars Galaxies was one of my favorites back in the day. Guild Wars 1 and 2, City of Heroes, etc. Back in the old day when I had more time to play MMOs. And then like mobile-wise, probably like there's 3 that really stick out to me as kind of influencing me, and that was Summoner's War, Galaxy of Heroes, and Clash Royale. I think were probably the 3 that stick in my head the most.
Nice. So you had mentioned Star Wars Galaxies specifically. Yeah. So most people watch my content know that is hands down my favorite game of all time.
Oh wow, I didn't even know that. Oh wow,
it's not even awesome. A close comparison. Like that game just completely that game had me hooked. That was my first MMO and my life changed.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what server were you on? If you remember,
I was on Bria. Bria. Yeah.
I was on Loca myself, but a lot of people were on Bria. Right on.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you said you play a lot of games. What games do you currently play?
I'm playing obviously Marvel Strike Force. I'm also playing a bit of World of Warcraft Classic when I can get some time, not too often. Bit of Overwatch. And I like the occasional survival game. So I've been playing a little bit of Ark Survival.
Nice. It's an interesting mix. I wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah. All over the place.
So pivoting a little bit towards Marvel, do you have a favorite Marvel movie?
I do. I mean, it's I'll be honest. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the MCU, so it's hard to put a number one on one of them. But it's probably Infinity War if I had to guess. probably Infinity War.
Yeah, that one was excellent.
Yeah, I think that movie stood out to me because it really did kind of break the mold of sort of a traditional Hollywood movie, and I liked it a lot.
And I think they got rewarded for their risk taking. I mean, it was just, almost everyone agrees it was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge fan. I thought the portrayal of Thanos especially was just incredibly on point. Very, very well done.
Absolutely. So on that note, speaking of characters, do you have a favorite Marvel character? And again, if you don't have like a specific one.
I think I can narrow it down to Venom, our favorite anti-hero. Yeah. So I think it's Venom.
I got to visit the offices a couple times, and I think on the first trip that me and Mobile Gamer were there was like a giant Venom thing on the wall. Do you have anything to do with that?
No. That's just people like Venom. He's a cool character.
Fair enough. Yeah, he's pretty awesome. And I think you guys, with the symbiotes that are currently in the game, they're pretty awesome now.
I hope you guys like them. Yeah.
They're a super strong combo. I love it.
Yep. We for a long time, wanted to kind of make a coherent team. I mean, it's only 3 plus the most people seem to be running the other 2 Spider-Men with Miles and Peter. It was a lot of fun to make that team. Super happy.
Absolutely. And so last question on the profession front, and then we'll get into some Marvel Strike Force specific stuff. But if you weren't a senior game designer, what other job could you see yourself doing? Janitor,
definitely. Let's see. So honestly, I came out of school with like a minor in comp sci, so it probably just would have been a software engineer, which isn't too far away from kind of what I'm doing now. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronomer.
Oh wow.
Weird thing for a kid to want, but yeah, that was what that's what stuck out to me, was being an astronomer. So maybe in another life.
So you could say you've always been destined for stardom.
There you go.
Sorry, that was unbelievably cheesy. All right.
That's okay.
That's what you get with me sometimes. But all right, so let me quick intermission for half a second. All right. So let's jump into some Marvel Strike Force questions. I hope I came up with some really good ones. I hope that the people watching are happy with the assortment I've gone with. But so we'll open up with a fun one. Can you share a game mechanic that you really want to introduce, but that you just haven't been able to yet?
Sure. Probably, honestly, for a really long time, I have always wanted to be able to, when you tap and hold on an ability in combat, for it to flash the characters that it's actually going to affect based on your primary target, right? So like, if you were going to do an AoE attack or something, sometimes, especially like in raid missions where there's more than 5 characters on the screens, it can get a little hard to judge adjacency. I mean, if you've been playing the game a long time, it's easier, but that has always been kind of a pain point for me. So I wanted to make a better system for that, which leads into I've wanted to do more kind of adjacency or positional based attacks, but lacking that type of a feature has kind of been holding us back on those.
Gotcha. And so if you could start to see stuff like that, maybe you could do more like chess piece style moves, like hit people in an L shape or stuff. All right.
Exactly. Stuff like that. Yeah.
I like it. So on to this question. What factors determine how powerful a given character is, and ultimately who makes the final call on that?
Sure. There's a lot of stuff that determines a character's power. I think probably number 1, we try to look at Marvel lore and try to judge, approximately how powerful they are in the Marvel universe. That could be really hard to judge, obviously, because there's different iterations of characters. Sometimes they get access to something, so that's a piece of it. We definitely take acquisition method into consideration, of course. It would be, I think, silly to say that a character's legendary without them being, at least a bit of a step above the crowd, right?
Right.
And then, kind of just, this one's a bit harder to describe, but sort of the goal of the character and the meta needs, right? So like, if we're designing a team to beat another team, sometimes we just have to boost something, up or down, to meet that goal.
As needed,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So So it's about making sure that we can hit that goal, but paring it down as much as possible. So I think it's a bunch of different factors. And then the final call question, if we've been doing a good job, it doesn't really come down to a certain individual, right? It's as I mentioned earlier, describing kind of our process for creating characters, it's really collaborative. We try to get as many people together. We sort of align on what the goal for a character is before we even begin developing them, right? So as it's really more of a, do we think we're hitting that goal, yes or no, before the character goes live. I also mentioned I do the final reviews on characters, so I definitely have some measure of influence on sort of their final state. But if it needed to go higher than me, it would go up to our creative director, Jason Bender.
Nice. Okay, so he's ultimately the one who, just as an example, could have looked at Heimdall and been like, "No, I like this guy. Just make him stronger."
He didn't, but yes. Right. If it came down to it, yes.
All right, fair enough. All right, so obviously one of the hot topics in the game is which new characters are getting added. Mm-hmm. If we wanted a certain character to get added into the game, who is involved in making that decision? And also, if you know their PayPal address, that would.
There's a lot of factors that come into who we decide to put in the game. Honestly, if you wanted to bribe someone, it's probably like Kevin Feige, because if they introduce a character into the MCU, it makes it a lot easier for us to introduce it.
All right, so we'll just fund a movie. Got it.
There you go. Yeah, just get the character into a movie. But we also pull a lot from the comics, not just old comics. We're definitely looking at characters that are being created recently, and we sort of juggled the idea of trying to hit as many Marvel events as we can with what do we actually need for the game's meta versus what do we need to balance out the traits. For example, we try to do our best to attempt to balance the trait origins because as you know that links to gear, so it's bad when we have too much of one trait sliding in one direction versus
can confirm. Yeah.
Yep.
Every once in a while we get bombarded with a certain trait. It's pretty rough.
We do our best to try to mix it up. I think in the next few releases, you'll see a better attempt to try to split it up. Sometimes it's rough, right? If we pick an individual character, and they're just, or if we picked a team, for example, and they're all bio, it's like, well, we can't really change it.
So. Yeah, we're not just gonna lie and make them mystic when they're not. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just about juggling all those different priorities.
Fair enough. Yeah. Moving on. This is an interesting one. So has there been a character that even after final review you came to realize after the fact you either like grossly underestimated or grossly overestimated their capabilities?
Definitely. I think a good example of that, of the underestimating, was Minerva. I think we knew she was going to be good, obviously, but we definitely underestimated her potency in modes with enemy HP that was significantly increased, like Dark Dimension, for example. So we knew she was going to be good. We knew she was going to be valuable in raids. We wanted her to be valuable in raids, but we probably underestimated a bit her value in the Dark Dimension mode specifically. We just made the best of it. So, on the overestimating, I don't think we've ever had a character that we really thought. Yeah, it's tricky. I don't think we've ever had a character that was that we overestimated significantly. I think a way to say it is we've probably had a few characters that like missed their mark, right? That didn't get picked up by the community in the way we thought they would, I guess is the way to say it.
One that comes to mind for me, and this is an older one, but maybe like Vision. I remember the first iteration of Vision.
First iteration of Vision was a good example, which, then we gave him the juicer at some point that really kind of pushed him back up. I think Ant-Man and Wasp are another good example. Although they were very, very early on. Excuse me. I think Ant-Man and Wasp is another good example.
Fair enough. All right, so this is a question that, frankly, I wanted to make sure I put in here, but I didn't think I would actually get to ask. And I know the community has wanted to ask this one for a long time now.
I'm happy to answer it. Yeah.
Well, I'm more than happy to be asking it. So,
Sure.
Can you explain why the Wakandans were promoted as the Apex raid team, and do you feel that they, at one point, were or are the top raid team in the game?
Sure. So I would say the Wakandans suffered from some of the realities of software development. I know that sounds a little mundane, but the Wakandans were initially they were designed to be the best raids team in the game, and at a point internally they were. We actually we were trying to release them coinciding with another raid. I can't remember exactly which one it was, so I don't want to say it, but we had a raid internally that we were testing them against, and they were showing up to be the best. And then when we got down to the 11th hour, ready to release the team, that raid ended up getting delayed. So they got released into like a weird environment. So it's another example of a team that I think missed their mark a little bit. Even though they weren't probably the best when they came out, we did have internal metrics showing that people that were using them were performing well. But yeah, I mean, hindsight's 2020. Looking back at it, we recognize that kind of them missing their mark. So I'm hoping that upcoming Flash event that we're working on will sort of
give them some value.
Exactly, let everyone feel better about their investment there. And the last thing I'll say is there's a lot more than 5 Wakandans. So sometime in the future you may be happy about your investment.
Oh, that's very promising. And I'm quick to remind people that I'm like, no matter what team you've invested in, you never know if a rework is on the horizon. You never know if some new character is going to really escalate the team. And then just another quick note. Would you say that the Wakandans are a pretty snowball-y team?
I guess. I mean, what snowballing in what way? Like, if they're winning, they're winning, and if they're losing, they're losing. Like, is that accurate?
My experience with them is that they needed to be so strong to function effectively. So I'm guessing that you guys probably tested them at the time at like a high.
We did. And typically when we say a team is Apex, that we do kind of test them at their full power, right? Because when we say that, we're trying to insinuate that like they are the best, so you should, to unlock that potential, you need to invest in them. That's another good point that I did want to bring up, though. The Wakandans was another team that I think we did lock a little bit too much of their power behind their tier 4 ability materials, definitely. So any time that we've done that, the adoption rate for the team is slower. And if if an alternate team comes up that serves the same purpose that you don't need that investment for, obviously you're gonna go for the alternate. So there was definitely some lessons learned on tier 4 ability materials for that team.
Yep. And my personal take on this is, and it's probably just like conversations happening in different departments, but at that time in particular, while they needed so many T4s, they were even more scarce than they are now, and they're currently pretty scarce. So it was just maybe like 15 total players could have really afforded to bring them up.
Right. Definitely. The scarcity of tier 4s is something we're trying to do a better job taking into consideration when we're making years.
And I've noticed it, like with the new Brotherhood characters, they don't need much T4 to function, and I think that's great. And then also I think you guys struck the right balance with like they benefit a healthy amount from their T4s, but they aren't required to function. So if you like them and you want to make them crazy strong, you can, but they'll still accomplish their goals without them.
Yeah, and that's sort of I think maybe we'll talk about this later, but that's sort of one of the things that we try to do is that essentially by their 6th upgrade, the last T3 upgrade, we want to make sure that a character's ability is serving the function that it's supposed to serve, right? It's like, yes, of course, the T4 is going to make it better, but the ability should be doing what we intended it to do by that point.
Cool. Well, yeah, we've noticed that, and I've noticed just in general. I've been playing this game, excuse me, since the soft launch, and
Right.
I've noticed the style of the character kits and stuff is. You guys have really honed in on them. You've pretty much got it to a good rhythm now, and it's the point now where we're just always pretty much super excited to see any new kit because they've been delivering lately. So,
Thanks.
no
I
problem.
will
Thank
send
you.
that. I'll send that feedback back to the team.
I approve. There may be the occasional dissenter who's like, Heimdall is my favorite character ever, and you didn't make him super epic. But generally been very happy.
Can't please everyone.
So that said, what character do you most personally want to bring to the game? And also, is there a specific faction that you really just personally want to introduce to the game?
Yeah. I have been trying to get magic into the game. I really want to get magic into the game because I like demons and giant swords. So let's get magic into the game.
I support that initiative.
Yep. And faction-wise, I'll be honest. We've covered a decent amount of the Marvel factions. I mean, there's other ones that come to mind, like X Factor, X Force, Weapon X, stuff like all the exciting teams. I got one too. But to me, Marvel really is more about the characters. You can look at any individual character of Marvel, and a lot of times been a part of 15 to 20 different factions. So to me, it's more about the characters and less about the factions.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So of all the characters that you've already designed, who do you think is your favorite?
I like characters that have a lot of choices in their ability usage. So characters that come to mind there are we have already mentioned her, but I really enjoy playing Minerva, right? I like the idea that there are a lot of decisions you're making while using the character. I think Star-Lord's another good example of that, where you do have a lot of kind of with what you can do with that character. Probably some other good examples, but in general, controllers, I think, if I had to pick a class that was my my favorite, it would be the controllers, because I like kind of target dismantling the enemy team.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I like the adapt on the fly gameplay style. And so one thing I've noticed, maybe you're like, yeah, I knew this, but just pointing this out, one thing that a lot of those characters share in common is their ultimate and their special are both ready on first turn. So out the gate, you have choice. Whereas
the 3 options, yeah.
The characters that only have basic and special, it's well, you're almost always going to go with, a special over a basic. And so of course, they feel more automated.
The way, yeah, I mean, and that's one of the tools we use to differentiate characters, of course. For example, if we're going to do an old, let's just take Cyclops, for example. It would be a little crazy if Cyclops could do his ult on turn 1. Sometimes, just we want the character to have a giant, hit everyone, and we just can't do it on turn 1. And I mean, the other thing that I think, going back to that example is every one of Minerva's abilities has a very different use case, right? You're only going to hit her special if someone's down. Her ult usually best to press, but not always. There are situations where just using her basic is better. I like that style of gameplay.
Right on.
Yeah.
All right, moving on then. Have there been any memorable character or team combinations that the player base has come up with that really surprised you?
Sure. We could probably talk all day about this, honestly. But I think if I had to think of one, I think the Ultima 7 team, the Tech Wing team, is pretty interesting. The name's cool too. That was one that probably caught us by surprise a bit, but makes sense now. So that was one, and we all had a crack up laughing at the BKT team. We loved the name that came up or that you guys came up with for for that team, despite it just having Minerva on it.
Absolutely. I gotta give a shout out. Actually, that name literally originated with one of the officers in my alliance. So shout out.
Oh, really?
Shout out to Canage the Brainage for coming up with the best Kree team.
Good job. It was very, very funny. I had us laughing.
Yep. We noticed that when the envoys were last in the office that you guys had a preset BKT, and that was a big personal victory for him. I was like, the devs are using your name.
Have to do it. We're always watching, even if only Cerebral talk it. We're always watching.
And on that note, actually, with the surprising combinations, I've noticed, sometimes I'll see feedback where people are like, how did the devs not see this coming? Of course, everyone was going to use this team, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like I don't think I've ever seen a game where the devs were able to fully predict the meta, just because you only have so many developers who can spend only so much time thinking about it. And then when you turn it loose on hundreds of thousands of players that can, some of them spend all day just trying random things until something accidentally works great. It's just impossible to predict it 100% of the time. And I also think it would be less fun if it was so concrete that there was no room for no, just this is what they designed and this is what you use. I think it'd be less fun. So.
Yeah, I mean, we can't call ourselves an RPG if we're not allowing some level of that, mix and matching and letting the community figure it out. I don't have a quote for it, but one of my, probably if I had to pick a game dev that has inspired me a lot in my career, it would be Gabe Newell. And the way he always talks about it is the players, of course, are going to find things that you can't. There's more of them. They have more time, and they're probably smarter than some of you. So it's of course, the best way to design a game is to try to control as much as we have to. Of course, there's some level of control we have to exert, but then do our best to let the player base kind of live and breathe with this stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
You create the tools and you let them, make it fun.
Yeah,
and that's also why I really like modes like Alliance War, where the players have to, they've moved from trying to outsmart the raid nodes you guys have designed to trying to outsmart one another. And I think that's going to make the live PvP really fun as well.
Yeah, I know we've talked a bit about the live PvP mode. I'm super excited for that. It's something I've wanted since day one. And we actually even built parts of the functionality for it all the way back from soft launch. Really, the combat engine was sort of designed with this mode in mind. So we finally got around to making it a real thing. And the version that you guys are going to get is just sort of a casual, fun play mode. We'll be watching feedback for how everyone else likes it. It really does take the game to a new level, though, when you're not just playing against that AI on the other side that's just cycling through its abilities and
less predictable and more opportunity to outsmart other players and do unpredictable move patterns.
Absolutely. And I mean, the move patterns in particular are I've already learned things just from playing other people in the office. So it's a lot of fun.
I'm so looking forward to that.
Yeah.
What else we got here? Has there been anything about designing characters that you would say you've learned the hard way?
Sure. Let's see. What's the right way to put this? I think I wrote something down for this one. I think so. This definitely pertains to a mobile free-to-play game. I think the idea that small amount of power creep is actually necessary for the game to function. And I'll elaborate that. Because most of the time, in traditional game or in traditional video games, before we had these mobile free-to-play games, power creep was typically a very bad thing in a competitive game. It was a no-no word. But with the way mobile free-to-play games are set up, because of it's something we call the inertia of investment on a character, giving someone just another option, another way to do something, is not strong enough of a argument to go and invest in them, right? There has to be something that sets them apart. And that essentially is power creep. Like that you know, if every character that comes out needs to have something that makes them truly feel different and unique and a bit stronger than other characters in the game, then some amount of it is actually necessary in game definition.
Yep, and that is something I want to let you finish, but that's something I noticed that the players sometimes will contradict themselves on, is, you know, people will express their displeasure with, oh, each new character is just stronger than the older ones, but at the same point in time, when you guys do release a character, it's like, well, this character pretty much does what everyone else does and is not really stronger in any other way. Then everyone's like, oh, well, who cares about that character? It's like, well, you don't want new character releases to be who cares about that character.
Exactly. And then, you know, you touched on it too. The other piece of it is like embracing that small amount of creep lets us do stuff like go back and bump up old teams, right? It lets us create excitement around experiences like that. If we were just trying to rigidly balance everyone on the same line, there'd be no reason to go back. Right, so I think it also plays into the idea of mobile free-to-play games are also live games with events that create excitement around, you know, particular stuff. So I think, you know, and I think you can kind of see that in some of our earlier, you know, some of the earlier characters we released were probably closer to just that balance line, and I'd say that's probably the lesson we learned.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think reworks are nice in that they serve to potentially reward people for just investing in characters they really like. And as like oftentimes I'll do roster reviews for people and they'll say, oh, you know, before I knew how good this character was, I put a bunch of resources into him. Like, darn, I wasted my resources. And it's like, not necessarily. First off, you never know, there could be a rework. A new character could get released that's added onto that team that gives that character a lot of value. But so, like, you know, prior to the Ultimus rework, actually the guy who came up with the BKT team has a 7 red star Kree cyborg. And when he first got it, he was like, ugh, this blows. What a waste of my first 7 red star. And and after the Ultimus rework, he's like, all right, let's go, DD3. This is great. Yeah,
now that Kree cyborg's probably dropping people. So
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do want to give a shout out to my buddy Trom, who has for quite a while had just a fully maxed out Hydra minion team.
Oh no. He's going to be really happy, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's been jumping for joy. He is planning on having a 7-star Red Skull the day it goes live.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah. So he's been doing an experiment too. Just fun trivia for you. He has been taking his 5 Hydra minions through Dark Dimension 2. And
oh wow.
He's on like his 3rd month, I think. He's about halfway through. It's taking a little bit.
But, even after the rework,
it's sped up a little bit after the rework, but I think he needs Red Skull.
Yeah, but Red Skull will definitely help.
But yeah, there's just always those players who are like, look, I knew people with maxed out aim teams before their rework. Mm-hmm. There's just always players who are like, look, I just love these characters, and then
that's something that we try to support as best as we can, and that's why we go back and do those reworks so that people can end up having their fun.
Yep, and also it's just good for the game. I come from League of Legends, and they do this thing where they just look at like the win rates among like the top level competitive players, and like just whatever characters are just at the way bottom just doing pitiful, they just bring them up, and whatever characters are way up at the top, they just bring them down a little bit, and they just, you know, they keep it forever cycling, and it does it so that, you know, whatever characters you're a big fan of and you play a lot, like sooner or later you get your time in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And so I think that's good too for the game environment, is when most teams have that moment where they really shine. Just kind of creates that excitement.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely take a lot of inspiration from MOBAs, like when looking at kind of like how to run a live game. Every successful MOBA I've seen does that well. Basically just making sure that they're, I think even Dota 2 recently has been doing way more character updates than they used to. It's a good thing for the game. Keeps it healthy, keeps it fresh.
Yep. And so on that note, just throwing in a comment, you don't necessarily have to address it, but help out our friends, Bullseye, Night Nurse, our long forgotten fallen comrades.
You have 7 red star of those 2 characters, don't you?
I have no 7 red stars. It's actually.
Oh really? Wow.
It's a running joke. So I've got to be right around 20,000 spent on this game at this point. And every time a new character releases, at a minimum, I get the $100 worth of red stars, and I do a video on it. and still not a single red, 7 red.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I work here, and I only have one, and it's the Hydra Sniper. So,
oh man.
I mean, a little bit better now, but yeah, for a long time, it was not great.
I noticed that too. Cerebro, I just did his roster review. He has a single 7 red, and it was Hand Blade Master.
Yep.
And I was probing him for like, oh, how did you feel when you got that pull? Do you remember where you were? And he was like, I have no recollection of it. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
It was so not memorable that I just.
Yeah.
You people with your 7 red stars.
It's we experience the system just like you guys do.
Makes sense. Oh, what aspects of character design would you say most people don't realize is part of the process?
Sure. This one's a bit tough for me because I've been doing this for 3 years, 4 years, something like that, and so it's hard for me to pull myself back to where I was 5 years ago and think objectively. But I think probably if I had to pick one thing, it would be the idea that a village is needed to make these characters, right? It's not just like two people in the corner of the office putting everything together. It's all the way from business and marketing people and designers figuring out what characters we're going to make, going into concepting with artists like concept artists, animators, VFX artists, going into designing the characters with design, and going into writing up tech specs for what we might need with engineers, working with engineers, implement. Like every single one of these characters has a lot of different people working on them. So I think that's probably the piece that I'd say that at least I, before I got into this business doing this stuff, probably didn't realize.
That's probably good to clarify. So if people see one particular character kit and they're like, this could have been done a little bit differently. It's not as simple as like, oh, well, Zach was sleepy that day, so this is what we got.
Yeah, definitely.
A few more hands on deck.
Yeah, quite a bit.
So kind of on that note, is there a character that you really wanted to make more powerful, but you just couldn't, because of the other powers that be?
Honestly, I don't recall that ever happening. I had mentioned it earlier, because we try to figure out the goal of a character before we actually start developing them. No, I certainly haven't been in a situation where someone came and said, you need to make this character like at the 11th hour, you need to make this character weaker or stronger. Sometimes when we're when we're doing like balance tests or play test stuff, we'll, this is probably too strong. This is probably too weak.
So I guess let me rephrase then. So, you were answering from a standpoint of like, once we've established, how strong they should be and what their purpose is. But so I was more asking like, do you have a Marvel character that you are a huge fan of that like for me, it's Heimdall, where like, I understand for balance reasons, like it wouldn't make sense to have like Heimdall on par with other legendary characters like that. Obviously you can't do that. But for me personally, I would say I wish Heimdall was stronger just because I like him. No other reason. I just wish he could have been a stronger character. So
yeah, I honestly I can't think of one. I mean, and the other part of it is like the idea that at any point one of those characters could get strong. So it's I guess kind of shifting this a little bit. The other I think I've seen this come up a lot too, like why has this character been bad for so long or something like that? And that's not someone telling us we can't make them better. That's usually a matter of priorities, right? There's only so many characters we can get to in an individual room. So it's less about someone telling us not to do something and more about making sure we have the time to do it properly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's just always, you're always going to get pulled from either side. There's always going to be people who are like, what are they? I hear this. I hear plenty of people saying like, oh, they shouldn't be working on new characters. They need to go back and fix so-and-so because I'm not happy with them. But then that like, it's the same time. It's not like you guys make new characters and then, are throwing champagne parties in the office with all your free time. So if you are going back and working on the old characters, then it's, well, we want more new stuff. So it's,
exactly. We just have to do our best to balance the old and the new. Best we can do.
And I think you guys do a pretty good job with that.
Thanks.
Moving on. Oh, this is a fun one. So, was there any particular like what seemed like a simple idea for a character mechanic that just turned into an engineering nightmare?
So I have one that's less of like a mechanic and more of just like a feature. Capes. Capes is a pretty good one. Where you'd think.
You just add the cape, make it move.
Yeah, just put the cape in there and make it move. Because we are a mobile game, we have serious like limits on what we can put on a phone, right? Yeah, and because we have potentially 20 characters on the field, we've had to do some engineering workarounds to get capes to look how they look now, and they're still not perfect. Like trying to making them not clip and stuff like that has been an ongoing engineering challenge for sure.
Fair enough. And that's a technology just keeps getting better and better. So I have seen like mobile games evolve just in terms of like the art models of the characters. For me, it's apparent when you guys bring like a character whose model is obviously done closer to the launch of the game versus like one of the brand spanking new ones. Just the difficulty in the difference in the quality of the animation in the model to me is like it's stark, but that's to say that it just keeps getting better. So
Yep. And then we also do stuff like we do different performance profiles and stuff depending on the device spec and stuff like that too. So
but maybe a year from now with the Galaxy S500, you guys will be able to pull off some really crazy stuff.
Yep, maybe.
So, having said that, if you had a magic wand and you could go in and like instantly redesign the entire aspect of the combat system, is there something that, if it could be done very quickly, you would go in and do it?
Well, I probably couldn't do it quickly, but if
you had the magic wand that could.
Oh, sure. I think, hindsight being 2020, I think I probably wouldn't have gone with the 10v10 on the field. I think I probably would have limited it to like 6v6, so 12 people total. I think both for performance reasons that we've mentioned and also just for combat clarity. I think when the field is totally loaded up with 10 people, sometimes it gets a bit rough to understand what's going on. So I think like if I could change one thing and not have to initiate a year of work, it would probably be something like that.
Fair enough. For what it's worth, I don't know much about the performance issues, and I've noticed when especially because you can summon a bunch of characters and have 10 people on your side, when there's a full 20 people on the field, it's noticeably crowded and it seems to be mildly stressful for the device. But performance issues aside, I do like the technical aspects of that many characters.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean the if we're just talking about like a pen and paper game, 10v10's awesome. But, you have to always balance that with the realities of technology stuff. Another one I think is probably, I mean, you said you played since soft launch, so you'll probably remember there was a time in soft launch we made all of our procs more powerful. We actually like speed up and slow and stuff like that got stronger, offense up and offense down.
Oh, I don't remember them being made stronger. I do remember a consideration to walk them back that was met with quite a bit of opposition.
It was. And I think that would have been one that, like, if I could go back to before we launched the game, I would have rather launched them at that weaker state, especially speed up and slow. I think speed up and slow did cause some creep problems that I has caused a fair amount of headaches for us. So.
Yep, and I agreed with both stances back then. I remember that, and I was like, I'm proud of the dev team on both fronts for this. Not that you guys need my approval, but I remember thinking like 50% speed up and speed reduction is just insanely powerful, and it doesn't.
Very good.
It's so dramatic, but I also understand like once it's in, any reduction to those just makes existing characters weaker, and that never feels good. So I think you guys did a pretty good job of like once you had created that situation, being like, all right, well, we're not going to nerf characters. We're just going to work around it and improve other things. And so yeah.
That's pretty much the stance we've taken. And I think we've done an all right job so far. Yeah.
Moving on, what else we got? Fun one. And you'll probably have a better idea of this now that you guys have been live testing the real-time PvP a little bit, but who do you think is the most skilled Marvel Strike Force player in the office?
Oh, well, it's got to be me, right?
I thought you might say that.
Yeah, it has to be me. I can't put a name to that, but I can say that we have probably, so most of us in the office play the game regularly, daily, right? We probably have about a dozen people in the office that play religiously, right? Like hardcore, like every day, going through all the hardest content and stuff like that. And we do lean on those dozen for getting us real feedback, with how the end game is sort of shaping out.
Interesting. Okay, they're like the chosen skill council.
Yeah. It's more than it's definitely more than one person. Yeah.
And would you say you're unofficially part of that group?
I think so. Yeah. So.
Cool. All right, good to have one of those people as someone who shapes the character kits, so that's good.
Yeah, I think it would be a little weird otherwise, right?
Yeah, probably. But it's I know, and it's I don't know the specifics of it. I don't know how much reach, but I do know that in other games, so probably and also Marvel Strike Force, there's probably at least a couple people in their positions who while they may be passionate about their trade, may not be as involved with the specific game itself. So.
Maybe. Yeah. Most people that I know around the office play.
That's been my impression too. Is that you guys pretty much all really enjoy Marvel Strike Force.
Cerebro's sitting over here right now playing the game while we're talking. So.
Not even paying attention. Good.
No, he's paying attention. He trusts me, so he'll let me just go off the cuff.
No, I'm just messing with him. That was the feedback on his roster reviews. People were saying like, "Oh wow, it looks like he actually plays the game a lot."
Yeah.
Like, of course. I mean, it's his job to understand what players are talking about with the game.
Yeah, exactly.
If he'd never played it, he couldn't do his job.
I don't think he'd be a very effective community manager if he didn't understand the game, at least at some level.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's it. I've been wanting to ask you this question for a while. What percentage of a match, and again, you have a better idea of this now with real-time PvP, what percentage of a given match would you say is skill, and what percentage is RNG?
Yeah, so this is another tough one because there's a lot of factors, right? So if we're so I'm going to dissect this a little bit, okay? So bear with me. So if we're talking like two teams of the exact same power, exact same composition, fighting each other in combat, you versus the AI, most of the time the player wins in that scenario, right? Mm-hmm. So in that scenario, you'd say it's definitely it's definitely on the skill side. But if you're considering factors like your red star polls and how your meta econ has shaped out, and what team is fighting what team, there's some teams have a lot more RNG involved in them. I'm sure the community is certainly getting familiar with fighting the Asgardians recently. There's a lot of RNG fighting them because their turn one, depending on who Loki decides to mind control, is a huge part of their initial opener, right? And we talked a lot about that because Coulson, for example, actually targets based on the stats, so it's consistent. Who he's gonna do that big explosion to on turn one. But for the Asgardians, we decided, let's keep that level of randomness in it, because if we design every team to function the exact way every time you fight them, that gets stale, right? So there's some level of that randomness needs to be present in order to keep things being fun. There's a lot of factors here, but I would say that we do try to push skill in our game as much as possible, and it shows because we have like a simulation tool that will run just autoplays for us, in mass, so we can kind of just get at least the AI versus the AI back, and we'll see scenarios where the AI is potentially losing more than they're winning, but in the hands of a player, we're winning way more.
Oh wow!
So it's very hard for me to just put a number to it. You know what I mean? Because of all the various factors. But
I understand that. So let me try to kind of reshape the question a little bit, because I'm more looking at like, so for live PvP, where neither party is controlled by the AI. So let's just say, and it'll probably vary a little bit team to team, but so let's say that me and you are both engaged in live PvP with max defenders teams.
Okay, so we're mirror matching.
Yes, it's a mirror match. What would you say is the, like, how much of it is going to be influenced by making the, targeting the right character first and using the right abilities in order and making the right judgment calls versus how much is the individual RNG procs? Theoretically, we could both do everything perfect and it would come down to RNG. But so, and again, I know, there's no exact number, but for me, it seemed kind of like poker, which they say is like 70% skill and 30% luck.
I was about to throw 75 out for that specific scenario, at least. Yeah, about 75 probably skill. There's a lot of importance with targeting, right? That's one of the things, because your options are somewhat limited. You've got the three abilities, and then potentially up to 10, but usually 5 people to target. We definitely make sure that targeting is a really important aspect of the game. Yeah.
All right, cool. So you guys think about the same balance as the impression I've been getting. Cool.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'd say that while there is some RNG involved with, like, in that instance, if I happen to have high red stars on one character over another, that would be RNG before the match starts. But I would also say that there's a skill component to working around that. And I'd say, like, in Blitz, there's certain teams that I will run against the defenders. Let's just say like a 300k defenders team, I'll fight them. But if it just so happens that same 300k defenders has a 100k JJ instead of an Iron Fist, then, if it's her that I need to kill first for that matchup, there's skill involved in knowing just to not take that version of that. So,
absolutely.
Or to try to focus out Punisher or ASAP instead to change up the strategy. So.
Yep, absolutely. Recognizing those power differentials, understanding what your team is capable of punching up. I mean, in Blitz it's a little bit different, but at least in War, understanding what you can punch up against, that's all part of the calculus. So,
it's a lot of fun. That's what I really enjoy. So, this is an interesting one. So, when balancing content, are there any major, like, progress landmarks that you guys use as, like, benchmarks for, how powerful characters should be at certain points, and what are some of those, like, landmarks that you try to?
Sure. So, like, my team is primarily focused on just balancing the characters themselves, right? So less about the content, but obviously if a character's intended to work in a piece of content, then we test the character in that environment. So we'll do all sorts of stuff. Like one example would be if we wanted a team like Team A to beat Team B, one landmark that we'd use is making sure that team, in whatever mode we're expecting to be good in, can beat that team a tier down. Okay, so like making sure that let's just use a hypothetical example, that the old Brotherhood team could beat the old Nick Fury and Shield team down an entire gear tier, right? So like tier 13 versus 14. We usually use 13 versus 14 because that's the biggest.
Oh, that's jump. How long have you guys been doing that? 'Cause that jump is very different than anything else.
Recently. Okay. We used to, before the level cap increase, we used to use 12 versus 13. But we have to use it because the power increases in the game, right? So we have to work around it. So that's like one example, and I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. The tier 4 ability materials are another example of this, where it's like our goal is that before you get to the purple ability tier, so before you get to the tier 3 ability materials, abilities should represent their function. Once you've gotten through purple upgrades, they should be serving their function, right? And then the orange should feel like icing on the cake, right? It should just feel like the thing got a little bit better. Sometimes that little bit ends up being, a lot. But,
well, T4s are rare. It's fair to.
Yeah. So I think that's probably pretty close to it, and like I guess in the case of like the symbiote team that we did recently, they're like a raid and dark dimension team, so we would take what we consider to be the best team for that content in live, run it through it, get kind of a baseline for like, okay, it takes this team 10 attempts or whatever to get through Ultimus 7. So the new team that we develop should definitely be getting through it in less than that, right? Otherwise, why would you invest? So
right, no, that's
stuff
fair.
like that. Yeah,
and that allows me to just interject a little bit of math here. I don't know if you guys put all the hard values on it, but for me and my crew of nerds that specifically worry about this kind of stuff, it sounds like if a team is supposed to hard counter another team, if we're weighing Gear Tier 13 against Gear Tier 14, it seems like roughly a 30 to 35% punch up should be a reasonable expectation for a hard counter.
Yeah, you're talking just in power numbers, right?
Yep.
So,
well, just in terms of like how much the stats improve from that gear tier. I'm just kind of letting people know that it's roughly.
I think I'd have to double check the numbers. Red Stars muck with it a little bit,
true.
But I think in lacking Red Stars, I think it's supposed to be somewhere closer to 25, but it might in practice be a little bit more than that.
We looked at it all things max, so it's very possible that 7 Red Star inflated that a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
But even 25%, very reasonable. Okay.
Yeah.
I like it. And I know in the past, way back, some counters were designed, like I believe, and I could be mistaken, but I think back when the Spider-Verse was designed to counter the Fury Shield team, I think that they did at more or less even power.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of that came down to the shield securities resistance and the fact that he has defense up so often. That shut down their ability to do what they needed to do, which was get that turn 2 disrupt on the security so that you could start dismantling, the rest of the team. So.
Yep, but again, there's just more evolution in the game. The way they used to evaluate counters has evolved, and I think that's been kind of tightened down as well. So.
Yeah, and I think that team came out before we had War too, right? So War has taught us even more about making sure that we get those counters right, because now they matter more, right? Now that you're kind of cycling through different teams to fight.
Yeah, specifically, and they have to be able to do some degree of punch up just so that even if they can only win an even matchup, they can do it through the War buffs and debuffs. So.
Yep, definitely. Some of those buffs are.
Yep, I think that some of them could be harsher, but there are a handful that are just security is just rough, man. Just
and we're always talking about stuff like that. I mean, we designed that mode to be able to be dynamic, so we could change that stuff out if we wanted to.
Cool. I think most people enjoy it. Some people complain about War, but I think the general experience is that War is fun.
I hope
when you're winning.
I enjoy it. Yeah, when you're winning. I mean, that's what I always tell my alliance when we're, you can't win them all. That's the nature of a competitive game. But even when I'm losing, I think I always learn something. I always get a better sense of how much a teammate can punch up.
Yep.
That I especially liked, and I know there's some debate on this, but the War defense team has been a lot of fun for me. I like probably one of the things I get the most enjoyment from is going to check my room and see people, failing to beat my teams. That's like just so much fun.
Yep, it's certainly fun. But so the while having a good War defense team is fun, I think the feedback to that I've noticed is people want to be experiencing it, and more importantly, like the strong version of that team is something that's never in the player's hands. So separately, I've been advocating for a sandbox blitz mode where everything is enabled. I'm glad that message is getting through.
I have heard about this. Yes,
excellent. I think that'd be fun. But I like the defense teams. I will say generally the general consensus is that people are fine with making War teams, but people like War bonuses, but they don't like rigid War offense or War defense bonuses. They're basically saying give them War bonuses, and it'll be fairly apparent to us whether they're a good War defense or a War offense. So. Sure. But
makes sense.
But I know that you had to start with some kind of foundation for the War defense team. So
we did. Obviously, we had. This is more of an end game problem, but we have a lot of data, at least on the at the top end, wars do get cleared, before the war ends, which isn't necessarily, intrinsically a bad thing. But it was slated way too much in the favor of offense towards the beginning of war, with a lot of the top end wars getting cleared, I think, as soon as one of the energy refreshes came up, because that was like as soon as everyone got enough energy to actually clear the helicarrier, they would. And that still happens occasionally, but it's definitely happening less. So.
Yeah, I've noticed that it certainly slowed the pace of offense a little bit, and I think Red Skull's probably gonna do pretty similar.
Yeah, I'm so surprised you didn't have any questions. Red Skull, he'll be interesting.
I tried not to ask things that I didn't think would get answered, and you guys, you're answering more than I thought you would. So now I'm like kind of kicking myself, like, oh, I should have asked even more hard hitting questions, but
yeah.
So just real quick, an improvised question on Red Skull.
Okay.
Do you personally think that the Red Skull Hydra team will be like the new top war defense, or just among the top, but not necessarily the new?
I think it's probably. I don't know if I'd rate them, say, above the Asgardians. Probably like close to the same level as the Asgardians. There are some teams, and the reason I'm saying that is there are some teams, or there's at least one character that will help shut them down pretty significantly, and we'll probably have some, on the way. So, but I'd say it's the first time. So let me take a step back. A lot of our defense teams up until now have been focused on healing sustain, right? So you got your medic with Coulson and all the Asgardians heal, and you've got Hela. So this is probably the first time where we stepped a bit, like we tried to come up with a mechanic that sort of came up with the same idea of, okay, there's this team that's probably going to take more than one attempt to beat, probably, but it's not just off of healing, because the worry with doing a ton of just healing based defense teams is you get into these scenarios where you literally can't beat them, right? Like if you don't have the heal block or the just damage to get through their sustain, you get into this scenario where sometimes you'll go into a fight
and heal
where
them
some
up.
people they actually end up at higher health than when you went in, and that's a really bad feeling.
Yes.
So we're trying, it's one of the tools we're using. We're trying this one out where it's like, okay, there's this really rigid mechanic that makes it almost feel a little bit like a raid fight, right?
Yeah.
To get through, but at least you'll feel the constant progress, because you'll be constantly removing those charges from Red Skull. So,
all right, we got time for one more question.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Well,
I can go longer.
I gotta get. We actually have stuff to do today.
Oh wow! All right.
Almost done. All right. Well, let's see then. I gotta pick a good one.
We'll have to do another one of these, Nick.
Yeah. Well.
I like it.
All right.
Well, then let me pick a good last one. Yeah, I think this is a good last one. Yeah, let's go with this. So the player base has noticed a trend towards more rigid synergy as opposed to more plug and play characters. I would say kind of like Vision, and
Sure.
I think there's fans for both aspects, but so it seems like the general trend has been more towards synergized teams. Can you elaborate on kind of why they made the decision to go more towards synergy than plug and play?
Sure. The last question is the one that's going to take the longest to answer here.
Oh. I apologize.
That's okay.
Take that, Cerebro.
Yeah. Okay, so at the beginning of the game, I think we had a problem, right? The same 5 to 10 characters were all over the game, and they were primarily the only characters who really needed to be successful in the game. So we analyzed that a lot, kind of figured, because early on in the game we launched the game with synergies, right? There was stuff in there that called out to specific traits, but they weren't strong enough. Like we did try to, we probably had a bit too much of the allowing theory crafting to the point where, like, let's take Black Widow as an example. Black Widow dominated the game for close to a year, probably. And we attributed that to the idea that she was just applying speed up, one of our strongest procs, to almost anyone. I think it's like 60% chance or something for non-Avengers at top level. So, you know, we had to go back to the drawing, and we had to think about, okay, well, we want, like, one of the core goals of Strike Force is not just to pick your 5 favorite Marvel characters and go. It's to build up your rosters as wide as you can, right? Like, we always knew we were going to do war, so we always kind of had this idea that we want to condition players towards that idea of, no, you should want all of these Marvel characters, and of course you're going to have favorites. You're going to, you know, you're going to boost those favorites up to the top, but you really should have a reason to want everyone. So we definitely shifted towards, you know, pockets or teams of characters, and we started making those synergies more powerful, right? Because that was what we had to do to make them feel like a proper team. So I think, but, you know, aside from that, we do understand that theory crafting is a core part of a role, right? So we also are doing what we can to open those up when we can. Okay. I think when you look at, we've had some examples of these characters, right? Like, even after this started happening, let's take Captain Marvel as an example, right? Captain Marvel is a character that fits onto most teams. I mean, you can also say the team of Ultron, right? You can throw Ultron on almost any team. Hela is another example. So it's basically what I'd say is we created the idea of, I'll use your term for it, rigid synergies, as a balancing tool. It's sometimes we will create characters intentionally that don't have those same levels of restrictions. We're also trying to do a better job of saying, okay, well, like, let's take Sinister as an example. We could have made all of his bonuses just Marauders, right? And he'd still be probably as powerful in the meta as he is now.
Yeah.
But we recognize that, well, you know, we're probably going to make more villain mutants in the future, right? So let's make a few of his traits more broad, so that leaves a little bit more room for theory crafting. Of course, he's going to excel with his other 3 Marauder companions, but you know, I've seen him show up on a few other teams too, and he seems to be doing fine there. So yeah, I think you know, that's a long-winded answer for.
Sometimes it's not a simple answer.
Yeah. It's really not. You know, as you guys know, we release a lot of characters. We've got a lot more coming. So we are doing our best to make it feel like they all have a role and a purpose in the game, and sometimes that is that rigid synergy.
Fair enough. And then, so just finally, before I let you go, you'd mentioned before we started recording, you thought you had something maybe you could tease out. So before Cerebro runs in and shuts us down.
Yes. So something, in working on. So I don't think this is going to be in the next patch, but probably the patch after that. We're planning on letting. So we had done this for Phoenix and Dark Phoenix. We're going to let all summoned units inherit red stars and Stark Tech from their summoner. Okay, cool. So you have 6 red stars on Kingpin. His bodyguards will also have 6 red stars. So I think that'll hopefully help. Some of the old summoners definitely lost some of their potency when we released the red star system. So
the older summons have become people you sneeze at and they fall over. So
exactly. So we've been testing this to make sure everything's working out and the math's all working out, but everything looks good. So you'll probably see that coming pretty soon, next couple of months.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I see you looking over. I guess Cerebro's giving you the
something like that. Yeah.
I will let you go. But thank you so much for joining me. Sorry if this went a little long. But yeah, it's an absolute pleasure.
Of course.
Yeah. I enjoyed talking to you. I hope I get to do it again soon. I think people are going to be very happy with what you've had to say. And I already thought you guys were doing a pretty good job, but just in hearing how you approach things, I think if nothing else, absolutely the character kits are in good hands. So
thanks. Thanks for having me, Khasino. I appreciate it, and we appreciate all the good work you do for the community. Those tier lists are great. So thanks.
No problem. It's thank you for giving me the opportunity to be able to do them by making fun and interesting characters.
Yeah. Alrighty.
I will let you go.
All right. And have a good one.
You too. Thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time.